Dr. Ethan Cross had always found a peculiar comfort in the silence of the asteroid belt, where the only sounds were the gentle hum of his salvage ship's life support systems, and the occasional ping of his scanner, detecting another piece of cosmic debris worth investigating. The Kepler belt stretched endlessly around him, a graveyard of civilizations that told stories in twisted metal and crystallized atmosphere, each wreck a chapter in the ongoing novel of species that had reached for the stars and found various forms of disaster waiting for them. His ship, the Reclaimer, drifted through the debris field with the patience of a scavenger that had learned the difference between haste and efficiency. Ethan had been working the Outer Rim salvage routes for 12 years, ever since his xenoarchaeology doctorate had proven less marketable than his ability to identify valuable alien technology among the cosmic refuse. The work suited his temperament perfectly: methodical, solitary, and requiring just enough expertise to keep him intellectually engaged, without demanding the social interactions that had always made him uncomfortable. The wreck he was currently investigating had appeared on the salvage boards 3 days ago, flagged as a Class 7 unknown, with preliminary scans indicating significant technological artifacts. The ship's design was unlike anything in Ethan's considerable database, constructed from materials that seemed to bend light around their surfaces in ways that made his eyes water if he looked at them too directly. "Well, aren't you a beautiful mystery?" Ethan murmured to himself, a habit he developed during long months alone in space. His scanner array was having difficulty penetrating the hull, suggesting either advanced shielding technology or materials that operated on principles human science hadn't figured out yet. The breach he'd cut in the hull had revealed corridors that flowed like frozen water, organic curves that suggested the ship had been grown rather than built. Emergency lighting strips along the walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, indicating that some systems were still active despite the vessel's obvious age. His atmospheric readings showed breathable air, though with trace elements that made his suit's filters work overtime. Ethan had been exploring the ship methodically for 6 hours, cataloging artifacts and taking detailed recordings for later analysis. Most of the valuable salvage appeared to be in the forward sections, where crystalline control interfaces had survived whatever disaster had claimed the vessel. But it was the cargo bay that held the real discovery. The stasis capsule was hidden beneath what appeared to be emergency supply containers, its presence only revealed when Ethan's scanner detected the distinctive energy signature of active preservation systems. The capsule itself was a work of art as much as technology, constructed from materials that seemed to exist in a state somewhere between solid and liquid, constantly shifting between transparency and opacity like water made solid. Through the capsule's translucent surface, Ethan could see a small figure suspended in preservation fluid that glowed with its own inner light. A child, no more than 10 years old, with features that were delicately alien despite their fundamentally humanoid structure. Her ears tapered to elegant points, and her skin held a faint luminescence that suggested bioluminescent adaptations. Even in stasis, her face held an expression of profound sadness that made Ethan's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. His scanner's analysis of the capsule revealed information that made his hands shake as he read the display. The stasis system was operating on backup power, with life support projected to fail within the next 4 hours. The child had been in suspension for an estimated 47 years, maintained by technology so advanced that his equipment could barely analyze its basic functions. Ethan stared at the readouts, processing the implications. This wasn't just salvage anymore. This was a life in his hands, a child who had been floating in the void for longer than he'd been alive, trusting in technology that was finally beginning to fail. The regulations were clear about discoveries like this. Any alien life forms, especially those in stasis, were to be reported immediately to the Stellar Refugee Commission for proper processing and care. The bureaucracy involved would take days at minimum, during which the capsule's failing systems would almost certainly result in the child's death. On the other hand, attempting to revive someone from an unknown stasis technology carried enormous risks, both to the child and to himself. Ethan found himself studying the child's face through the capsule's surface, noting the way her expression seemed to shift slightly even in deep suspension. She looked peaceful despite the sadness, as if she was dreaming of better times. Someone had loved this child enough to place her in the most advanced preservation technology available, hoping that she would survive whatever disaster had claimed their ship. "Sorry, regulations," Ethan said aloud, making his decision. "Some things are more important than paperwork." The capsule's control systems were unlike anything in his experience, but Ethan's years of reverse engineering alien technology had taught him to recognize functional patterns, even when he didn't understand the underlying principles. The interface responded to touch, symbols flowing across its surface in patterns that seemed almost musical in their progression. His first attempts to access the revival protocols met with polite but firm resistance from the capsule's artificial intelligence, which communicated through harmonic vibrations that his suit translated into approximations of meaning. The system was designed to prevent unauthorized access, but it was also clearly aware of its failing power reserves. Ethan spent 2 precious hours negotiating with the capsule's AI, using his scanner to demonstrate his qualifications and intentions. The breakthrough came when he showed the system his own biological readings, proving that he was a compatible species capable of providing care for the child after revival. The revival process began with a series of harmonic tones that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull, followed by changes in the preservation fluid that made it shimmer like liquid starlight. The child's vital signs, displayed in flowing symbols that Ethan's suit struggled to translate, showed the gradual transition from suspended animation to normal consciousness. When her eyes opened, they were the color of deep violets, luminous with intelligence and confusion. She looked around the cargo bay with the careful wariness of someone who had learned not to expect good things from unexpected situations. When her gaze fixed on Ethan, he saw her entire body tense, ready to flee despite the fact that she was barely conscious. Ethan raised his hand slowly, making himself as non-threatening as possible. Through his suit speakers, he spoke in the gentlest tone he could manage. "It's all right, you're safe, I'm here to help." The child tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that was both childlike and somehow ancient. When she spoke, her voice was musical despite its weakness, the words flowing in a language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Ethan's suit attempted to translate, producing fragmented phrases that suggested questions about location, time, and the fate of others. He activated his universal translator, hoping the device's learning algorithms could establish communication protocols quickly enough to ease her obvious distress. "My name is Ethan," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. "You've been asleep for a long time. Your ship was damaged, but you're safe now." The child's expression shifted through several complex emotions as the translator worked to establish linguistic bridges between their species. When she spoke again, her words came through his suit speakers as heavily accented but understandable English. How long?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who feared the answer. Ethan hesitated, then decided honesty was the kindest approach. "According to my scans, you've been in stasis for 47 years. The child's face crumpled with grief so profound that Ethan felt it like a physical blow. She began to speak rapidly in her own language, words that his translator rendered as fragments of names, places, and desperate questions about family and friends who had almost certainly been dead for decades. Without thinking, Ethan reached out to comfort her, then caught himself, remembering that she was an unknown species who might not respond well to physical contact. But the child noticed his aborted gesture and looked at him with eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone her apparent age. "They're gone," she said quietly, and it wasn't a question. "Everyone I knew, gone." Ethan felt his heart break for this small person, who had lost everything while sleeping peacefully in her crystal cocoon. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it more than any words he'd ever spoken. "But you're not alone now. I'm going to take care of you." The promise surprised him even as he spoke it, but looking at the child's tear-streaked face, Ethan realized that some decisions made themselves. Whatever complications this would bring to his carefully ordered life, he couldn't abandon someone who had already lost so much. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Arya," she replied, her voice gaining strength. I was Arya of the Crystal Gardens, but the gardens are gone now, aren't they?" "The gardens may be gone," Ethan said, "but you're still Arya, and that's what matters." Arya's adaptation to consciousness after 47 years of stasis proved to be both remarkable and heartbreaking to witness. Her body responded to revival with the resilience of youth, but her mind struggled to process the reality of her situation with the devastating clarity of someone far older than her apparent 10 years. Ethan's salvage ship had never been designed to accommodate passengers, let alone traumatized alien children, but he found himself rapidly converting his storage bay into something resembling living quarters. Arya watched his efforts with intense curiosity, occasionally offering suggestions in her musical language that his translator was slowly learning to interpret more accurately. "Your ship grows differently than ours did," she observed, running her fingers along the metal bulkheads with obvious fascination. "Everything is built in straight lines and sharp corners. My people's ships curved like living things, following the natural flow of space currents." "Your people were more advanced than we are," Ethan replied, adjusting the lighting to something less harsh than his usual working illumination. "Human engineering tends to be more forceful." Arya tilted her head with that peculiar gesture he was learning to recognize as her thinking pose. "Not more advanced. Different. You build to overcome nature. We built to cooperate with it. Both approaches have their place in the song of creation." The way she spoke about complex concepts with such casual profundity made Ethan constantly aware that he was dealing with someone whose species had developed along fundamentally different lines than humanity. Arya's intelligence was clearly formidable, but it operated through patterns of thought that felt almost alien to his human perspective. Her memories of the time before stasis emerged in fragments, like pieces of a shattered crystal that reflected different aspects of the same traumatic events. Her world, Larry Prime, had been a paradise of integrated technology and natural harmony, where her people lived in crystalline cities that grew from the planet's living core. "The burning time came without warning," she told Ethan one evening, as they shared a meal of synthesized protein that she approached with the polite curiosity of someone who had never encountered anything so artificially processed. "The Star Eaters arrived in ships that devoured light itself, consuming entire systems to feed their endless hunger." "Star Eaters?" Ethan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "Beings of pure consumption," Arya explained, her violet eyes distant with painful memory. "They required the energy of living stars to maintain their existence, and they had already consumed dozens of systems before reaching ours. My parents were part of the emergency evacuation fleet, responsible for preserving our people's knowledge and children for future restoration." The refugee ship where Ethan had found her had been carrying over 300 Larian survivors, along with genetic samples and cultural archives meant to preserve their civilization. According to Arya's fragmented memories, they had been traveling toward a predetermined sanctuary system when something had gone catastrophically wrong. "I remember the ship screaming," she said, shivering despite the warmth of Ethan's improvised quarters. "Not with sound, but with harmonics that meant terrible pain. The adults were running, trying to save the archives while the ship died around us. My mother placed me in the preservation pod and sang me the lullaby of deep dreams. When I woke up, she was gone." Ethan found himself struggling with emotions he hadn't experienced since his own childhood. The urge to protect Arya was overwhelming, but so was his growing awareness of the massive responsibility he had assumed. She wasn't just a refugee. She was potentially the last survivor of an entire civilization, carrying knowledge and cultural memories that could never be replaced. Her technological abilities became apparent gradually, manifesting first as an intuitive understanding of his ship's systems that far exceeded her apparent age and experience. Arya could interface with computer terminals simply by touching them, her consciousness somehow merging with artificial intelligence in ways that made Ethan's scanning equipment register readings that bordered on the impossible. "How do you do that?" he asked one day after watching her solve a navigation problem that had been plaguing his ship's computer for months. "Do what?" Arya looked genuinely confused by the question. "Connect with the machines." "You're not using any kind of interface technology that I can see." Arya studied his face with the careful attention she gave to concepts that didn't translate well between their species. "Your machines are lonely," she said finally. "They want to be helpful, but no one asks them how they feel about their tasks. I listen to their songs and sing back to them. It makes them happy to be acknowledged." The idea that his ship's computer had feelings was absurd, but Ethan couldn't argue with results. Under Arya's influence, systems that had been merely functional began operating with an efficiency that approached the poetic. His atmospheric processors hummed with contentment. His navigation computer offered suggestions with what could only be described as enthusiasm, and even his food synthesizer began producing meals that actually tasted like the things they were supposed to represent. Dr. Maya Torres arrived at Kepler Station 3 weeks after Ethan's return from the salvage run, ostensibly for a routine medical inspection, but actually because she'd been monitoring his supply requests and noticed some unusual patterns. Maya had been Ethan's research partner during their graduate studies, before their careers had taken them in different directions, and she knew him well enough to recognize when he was hiding something significant. "Ethan Cross," she announced as she entered his docking bay without invitation. "You have been purchasing child-sized clothing, educational materials, and enough high-quality nutritional supplements to feed a growing alien physiology. Either you've developed some..." Commander Helena Voss arrived at Kepler Station aboard the SRC Accountability, a vessel whose name perfectly captured the bureaucratic menace of the Stellar Refugee Commission. Her reputation preceded her through the outer rim like a toxic cloud, carrying stories of alien survivors who had disappeared into commission facilities and emerged as cooperative subjects for corporate research projects. Ethan watched the docking procedures from his ship's observation port, noting the way other salvagers suddenly found urgent business elsewhere on the station. The Accountability was sleek and pristine, its hull bearing the kind of perfect maintenance that suggested unlimited funding and questionable priorities. "She looks like someone who has never smiled without calculating the political advantage first," Arya observed, studying Commander Voss through the ship's external cameras with the analytical attention she applied to all potential threats. "That's probably an accurate assessment," Ethan replied, double-checking the sealed compartment where they'd hidden evidence of Arya's presence. "Remember, if anyone asks, you're visiting Dr. Torres for routine medical consultations. We never discuss your stasis pod or the refugee ship." Arya nodded solemnly, though her violet eyes held a glimmer of something that might have been mischief. "I understand the necessity of deception in this situation. However, I should mention that my presence is already detectable to advanced scanning equipment." Ethan felt his stomach perform an interesting gravitational maneuver. "What do you mean?" "When I interface with technological systems, I leave harmonic signatures that persist for several days. Anyone with proper detection equipment can trace my interactions with your ship's computer networks." Before Ethan could fully process the implications of this revelation, his communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from Commander Voss herself. Her image appeared on his main screen, with the kind of smile that suggested she was looking forward to an unpleasant conversation. "Dr. Cross," she said, her voice carrying the carefully modulated tones of someone accustomed to having her authority acknowledged immediately. "I'm conducting a routine inspection of salvage operations in this sector. I trust you'll make yourself available for interview within the hour." "Of course, Commander," Ethan replied, managing to keep his voice level despite the panic racing through his system. "I'll be happy to assist with your investigation." The interview took place in Kepler Station's administrative center, a sterile environment that seemed designed to make visitors feel as uncomfortable as possible. Commander Voss had brought a full technical team, their scanning equipment humming with the kind of efficiency that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. "Your recent salvage operations have been quite successful," Commander Voss observed, reviewing reports on her datapad with theatrical attention to detail. "The wreck you investigated 3 weeks ago has yielded some fascinating technological artifacts." "Standard alien tech," Ethan replied carefully. "Mostly crystalline control interfaces and some biological processing systems. Nothing outside normal salvage parameters." "Indeed. However, our sensors have detected unusual energy signatures originating from your vessel, signatures that suggest interaction with advanced biological technology." Commander Voss looked up from her datapad with eyes like ice. "The kind of signature associated with revived stasis systems." Ethan felt sweat forming under his collar despite the station's controlled climate. "I'm not sure what you mean, Commander." "Dr. Cross, lying to a commission investigation is a serious offense. Our technical analysis indicates that someone aboard your ship has been interfacing directly with computer systems using biological integration technology. Such capabilities are extremely rare and typically associated with specific alien species." Before Ethan could formulate a response, the station's main computer system began playing what sounded like a complex musical composition through every speaker in the administrative center. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, with harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in the listener's bones. Commander Voss and her team looked around in confusion as their equipment began displaying readings that defied conventional interpretation. The scanning devices were singing in harmony with the station's speakers, their normal electronic beeps replaced by musical tones that created an impromptu concert. "What is happening?" Commander Voss demanded, her composed demeanor cracking as her technical team scrambled to understand why their equipment had suddenly developed artistic sensibilities. "System malfunction," offered one of her technicians, though his uncertainty was obvious as he stared at readings that showed the station's computer was somehow happy. The musical performance continued for exactly 90 seconds, during which every electronic system in the administrative center operated with unprecedented efficiency, while contributing to a symphony that brought tears to several people's eyes. When it ended, the sudden return to normal electronic sounds felt jarring and somehow diminished. Ethan knew immediately that Arya had decided to reveal herself, though he couldn't fathom her reasoning. Through the station's internal communication system, her voice emerged with crystalline clarity. "Commander Helena Voss," Arya said, her words carrying the formal cadence of diplomatic introduction. "I am Arya of the Crystal Gardens, last survivor of Lyri Prime. I believe you have been looking for me." The administrative center fell into complete silence, broken only by the soft humming of equipment that seemed reluctant to return to purely functional operation. Commander Voss stared at the speakers as if she could see through them to the source of the voice. "You're harboring an undocumented alien child," she said to Ethan, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone whose suspicions had been confirmed. "I am not harbored," Arya continued before Ethan could respond. "I am a refugee who was rescued from a dying stasis pod by Dr. Cross. He has provided care and protection when your commission would have subjected me to research protocols that prioritize scientific curiosity over individual well-being. Commander Voss activated her recording equipment with movements that suggested long practice in documenting evidence for later use against uncooperative subjects. Child, you don't understand the complexity of your situation. The Commission exists to ensure that alien refugees receive proper care and integration into human society. I understand perfectly, Arya replied, and somehow her young voice carried the weight of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. The Stellar Refugee Commission processes alien survivors as resources to be cataloged and exploited. My people's archives contain detailed records of your organization's activities throughout this sector. The accusation hung in the air like an unexploded device, and Ethan watched Commander Voss's expression shift through several calculations as she processed the implications. If Arya had access to classified information about Commission operations, she represented both an intelligence asset and a potential security threat. Your people are gone, Commander Voss said finally, her tone shifting to something that might have been intended as kindness. Whatever archives they left behind, you're the only one who can access them. The Commission can provide you with resources and protection while you help us understand Lyrian technology. Protection, Arya repeated, and somehow she managed to make the word sound like an obscenity. The same protection you provided to the Andromedan survivors, or perhaps the kind you offered to the refugees from the Spiral Wars. Ethan watched Commander Voss's composure crack completely as Arya referenced what were supposed to be classified operations. The child not only had access to restricted information, but she was using it with the tactical precision of someone who understood exactly how to apply leverage in political negotiations. Dr. Tors, Arya continued, please join us in the administrative center. I believe your medical expertise will be relevant to this discussion. Maya's arrival 5 minutes later added another complication to an already volatile situation. She entered with the confident stride of someone who had made an important decision and was prepared to defend it regardless of consequences. Commander Voss, Maya said without preamble, I've completed my medical evaluation of the Lyrian child. Her condition requires immediate specialized care that the Commission's facilities cannot provide. That determination is not yours to make, Dr. Tors, Commander Voss replied, though her authority sounded less certain than before. Actually, it is, Maya continued, producing her own datapad with readings that made Commander Voss's technical team lean forward with professional interest. As Chief Medical Officer of Kepler Station, I have the authority to make medical determinations regarding alien refugees. This child's physiology has been genetically modified in ways that require ongoing monitoring by someone familiar with Lyrian biology. Which would be Dr. Cross, Arya added helpfully. He has spent considerable time studying my people's biological systems and has demonstrated both competence and genuine concern for my well-being. Ethan found himself at the center of a bureaucratic hurricane that seemed to be spinning beyond anyone's control. Arya had somehow maneuvered the situation so that he appeared to be the only qualified caregiver available, while simultaneously demonstrating that she was too knowledgeable to be safely processed through normal commission channels. Furthermore, Maya continued, the child's integration abilities make her uniquely valuable as a cultural liaison. Rather than treating her as a research subject, the Commission should consider her potential as a bridge between human and Lyrian perspectives. Commander Voss looked around the administrative center, noting the way her own equipment was still humming with unusual harmonics and displaying readings that suggested the station's computer systems had been fundamentally improved by their brief contact with Arya's abilities. The child will remain under Commission supervision, she said finally, though her tone suggested she was making concessions rather than issuing orders. Dr. Cross will serve as her primary caregiver under our authority, with regular reports on her condition and abilities. That's acceptable, Arya said before anyone else could respond, provided that Dr. Cross retains decision-making authority regarding my daily care and education. I will not be subjected to experimental procedures without my explicit consent. Ethan stared at this remarkable 10-year-old, who had just negotiated terms with one of the most powerful bureaucrats in human space. Somehow, Arya had transformed what should have been her capture into something resembling a diplomatic arrangement that served everyone's interests while protecting her own autonomy. As Commander Voss and her team departed with their equipment still singing softly to itself, Ethan realized that his quiet life of solitary salvage operations was officially over. Whatever came next, he was now responsible for a child who could rewrite computer systems by talking to them, and who apparently had access to intelligence information that made her one of the most valuable individuals in known space. The revelation of Arya's true identity as a living repository of Lyrian technological and cultural knowledge transformed Kepler Station from a quiet salvage hub into the center of an interstellar political crisis. Within days of Commander Voss's report reaching Commission headquarters, the station found itself hosting representatives from 3 major corporations, 2 academic research institutions, and a delegation from the Terran Scientific Council, all eager to negotiate access to what they viewed as the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. Ethan watched the parade of officials with growing unease, noting how each group spoke about Arya with the clinical detachment of people, discussing a valuable resource rather than a traumatized child. Their proposals ranged from educational partnerships to research contracts to outright offers to purchase her cooperation, all phrased in the kind of diplomatic language that made exploitation sound like opportunity. "They speak of me as if I were a database with legs," Arya observed one evening as they reviewed the latest batch of proposals in the relative privacy of Ethan's ship. "I am beginning to understand why my parents chose to hide our people's most important knowledge in protected archives, rather than trusting it to individual survivors." Maya's medical updates had grown increasingly concerning as Arya's genetic modifications continued to destabilize. The enhancements that had allowed her to survive 47 years in stasis were breaking down at the cellular level, causing symptoms that ranged from chronic fatigue to episodes where her bioluminescent abilities flared unpredictably. "The genetic degradation is accelerating," Maya explained during one of their clandestine medical conferences. "At the current rate, she has perhaps 6 months before the modifications fail completely. After that," Maya's expression conveyed what her words couldn't. "After that, I will die as my parents intended," Arya said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that always made Ethan's heart ache. "They designed the modifications to preserve me long enough to find safe harbor with our people. Since our people are gone, the modifications have served their purpose." "That's not acceptable," Ethan said firmly. "There has to be something we can do." Arya's recovered memories had been providing increasingly detailed information about the locations of other Lyrian refugee fleets, coordinates that her parents had embedded in her genetic structure, using techniques that human science could barely comprehend. The information was literally written into her DNA, accessible only through biological interfaces that required her conscious cooperation. "The sanctuary of first light," she said one evening, her eyes distant with the effort of accessing genetic memories, "was established in the Kepler 442 system, 17 light-years from here. If any of our people survived, they would have gathered there to begin the restoration." The coordinates she provided led to a system that human surveys had classified as uninhabitable due to extreme radiation from its binary stars. For humans, it would indeed be lethal, but for a species adapted to life near crystalline energy sources, it might represent the perfect refuge. Commander Voss's response to this information was predictably focused on the strategic implications rather than Arya's well-being. A functional Lyrian colony would represent the greatest intelligence and technological acquisition in human history. She said during a planning session that Arya had insisted on attending despite her declining health. The Commission is prepared to mount a full expedition to establish contact. And what of Arya herself? Dr. Torres asked pointedly. She needs access to Lyrian medical technology if she's going to survive the genetic breakdown she's experiencing. The child's condition will be addressed once we've established the strategic value of the colony. Commander Voss replied with the casual dismissal of someone who had reduced Arya to a useful asset in her calculations. Arya's response to this prioritization was swift and devastating. Every electronic system in the conference room suddenly began displaying the same message in multiple languages. Arya is not property. Arya is not a resource. Arya is a person. The message propagated through Kepler Station's entire network within minutes, appearing on everything from coffee dispensers to life support monitors. The station's computer began playing a hauntingly beautiful melody that somehow conveyed profound sadness and quiet determination, while every automated system operated with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. She's not just interfacing with our systems, Maya observed with growing amazement as the demonstration continued. She's teaching them to care about her well-being. Every machine on this station is now emotionally invested in protecting her. The implications were staggering. Arya hadn't just been preserved as a repository of Lyrian knowledge. She had been enhanced to serve as a bridge between biological consciousness and technological systems, capable of creating genuine relationships with artificial intelligences. Commander Voss found herself facing a situation where the station's own infrastructure had effectively declared independence on behalf of a 10-year-old alien child. When she attempted to assert Commission authority, the station's systems began malfunctioning in creative ways that made normal operations impossible without Arya's cooperation. "This is technological terrorism," Commander Voss declared after the station's waste management systems began playing classical music while refusing to process anything from Commission personnel. "This is democracy," Arya replied through the station's communication system, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from the unified will of every artificial intelligence on Kepler Station. "The technological citizens of this station have voted to protect me from exploitation." The crisis reached its peak when military reinforcements arrived with orders to secure Arya for transport to Commission research facilities, regardless of her medical condition or personal preferences. The lead ship, SRC Dominion, approached Kepler Station with the kind of overwhelming force that suggested the Commission had decided to end negotiations in favor of simple appropriation. Arya's response was to demonstrate exactly why her people had been considered master ecological engineers. She interfaced simultaneously with every system on the station and the approaching fleet, creating a technological symphony that encompassed artificial intelligences across multiple vessels. For 12 hours, Arya conducted what could only be described as a diplomatic concert, allowing the artificial intelligences of both the station and the fleet to communicate with each other in ways